Los Angeles, a gentle autumn afternoon, the pale golden sunlight shining through the rows of palm trees along Wilshire Boulevard. Barron Trump, 19 years old, tall and composed, stepped out of his apartment after a morning of reading. He wore a white t-shirt, light blue jeans, and a bright red MAGA hat, a familiar item that was part of his personal identity. Today, he decided to visit LA Terrace, an upscale restaurant known for its luxurious ambience and impeccable service. He pushed open the glass door and stepped into the cool interior of the restaurant. Wooden tables were neatly arranged, and the light from crystal chandeliers reflected off the polished floor. Only a few patrons were scattered around, sipping wine and conversing in hushed tones. Barron wore his MAGA hat naturally, without any ostentation, and was led by the hostess, a woman around 35 with a professional smile, to a table near the window. Barron sat down and opened the menu, his eyes scanning the dishes. He didn't notice the glances starting to turn his way. An elderly couple at a nearby table subtly turned their heads, brows furrowing. Near the bar, two servers whispered, discreetly pointing in his direction. But Barron remained composed, focused on the menu. Then the manager appeared. Frederick, about 45, slim in a dark gray suit, approached with brisk steps. His face was stern, his voice deep. "Excuse me, sir, we do not allow political attire in the restaurant. I must ask you to remove your hat." Barron looked up, momentarily surprised but not flustered. He removed his earphones and set them on the table. "I wasn't aware of that policy," he replied, his voice steady, respectful yet firm. "Where is it stated?" Frederick crossed his arms, his gaze unyielding. "It's in our code of conduct," he said, pointing toward the entrance. "We want this place to remain neutral." Barron glanced around, noticing some patrons pretending not to listen while others stared openly. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said calmly. "I just want to have lunch." Frederick stiffened. "Remove the hat, or I'll have to ask you to leave." The room fell into a heavy silence. Barron considered for a moment, then nodded. "If that's what you require, I'll go," he said, standing up. The sound of his chair sliding across the floor was sharp and distinct. He picked up his bag, leaving his untouched glass of water, and walked out. The glass door closed gently behind him, but the tension inside remained palpable. Outside, Barron paused to adjust his hat. He wasn't angry, but a fleeting sadness passed through him. His mother, Melania, had taught him to treat others kindly even when they disagreed. Now, he felt that lesson being tested. Inside the restaurant, Mia, a young server, whispered to Frederick, "Are you sure? That's Barron Trump." Frederick waved her off. "This is my restaurant. No exceptions." But his eyes betrayed a hint of doubt. Barron walked to a nearby park and sat on a wooden bench under an oak tree. He texted his mother, "I just got kicked out of the restaurant because of my hat. It's okay." Then he texted his best friend, Jake, "How do you think I handled it?" The reply came quickly. "They were wrong," Jake wrote. "You were way calmer than I would have been." Barron smiled, and an idea began to take shape, to turn this into something positive. He called Jake. "I need your help organizing a charity event. Can we meet tomorrow?" At LA Terrace, the atmosphere remained heavy, like the sky before a storm. The patrons who witnessed the incident started posting on social media, attaching hastily taken photos from afar, Barron sitting at the table with his red hat, Frederick standing sternly. Barron Trump kicked out of LA Terrace just for wearing a MAGA hat. One post read, quickly garnering hundreds of likes and shares. "Is this what free speech looks like?" A sharp comment appeared soon after. "This restaurant is hypocritical, claiming neutrality while refusing a customer," another wrote. The news spread like wildfire, igniting a wave of controversy from all sides. Supporters of Barron called it unfair, while others defended the restaurant, arguing they had the right to run their business as they saw fit. Frederick stood behind the bar, phone in hand, scrolling through the posts with a tense expression. The screen lit up with a barrage of conflicting comments. "Good decision. Politics shouldn't invade dining spaces," one person wrote. "He's narrow-minded. I'll never go back," another countered. He clicked on LA Terrace's official Instagram page, once filled with beautiful photos of dishes and elegant decor, now drowning in negative comments. "They'll forget about this," he muttered, trying to reassure himself. But deep down, he felt an invisible pressure growing, like the undertow beneath a calm sea. He remembered the early days of opening the restaurant, standing in the empty kitchen, smelling fresh paint, dreaming of a place where people could escape the troubles of the outside world. Now, that dream seemed to be wavering. Meanwhile, Barron returned to his apartment, a small but cozy space on the 15th floor of a condominium. The room was minimally decorated: white walls, a gray sofa, and a large bookshelf filled with books on history, politics, and a few science fiction novels he loved since childhood. Light streamed in from the large window, illuminating his desk where he sat down and opened a worn, brown leather notebook. Words appeared in swift strokes. Neutral space? But refusing someone is also a choice, isn't it? If they want neutrality, why not invite me to stay and talk? He thought about the silent stares in the restaurant, Frederick's rigid stance, and the fleeting sadness he felt as he walked out the glass door. How could this be turned into an opportunity for dialogue instead of conflict? How could people be encouraged to sit together instead of pushing each other away? Then the idea came, clear as sunlight breaking through morning fog. A community fundraiser, not just to raise money, but to bring people together. He envisioned an outdoor event with free food stalls, music from a local band, and long tables where people, despite their differences, could sit down, eat, and share their stories. A festival for the less fortunate, where the rich and poor, young and old, conservative and progressive, could find common ground. He picked up his phone and dialed Jake, his best friend who once helped organize a small concert at their university. "Hey, it's Barron. I need your help organizing a charity event. It's urgent. Can we meet tomorrow?" Jake's voice on the other end was surprised but quickly enthusiastic. "Sure. 10 a.m. at the cafe on Melrose. What do you have in mind? Tell me." After hanging up, Barron smiled. He decided to hold the event right in front of LA Terrace, a symbolic choice, like turning a wound into a starting point for healing. He texted a few other friends: Sarah, who's great at graphic design, to make banners; another friend, Miguel, to handle the sound system. Within hours, the plan began to take shape, like a puzzle gradually revealing its complete picture. Meanwhile, at LA Terrace, the consequences of the incident were becoming increasingly evident. The restaurant's social media posts were flooded with negative comments. "I used to love this place, but not anymore," a regular customer wrote, accompanied by the hashtag #boycottutterass. "What neutrality when you so clearly chose a side?" Another person mocked. The phone at the reception desk rang incessantly. Some customers canceled their weekend reservations. Others called to protest or support. The space, usually bustling with laughter and the smell of food, was now silent, with only the faint background music sounding weakly as a futile effort to cover the emptiness. Mia, the young server, stood behind the bar, quietly speaking to an older colleague named Carlos. "I don't think he foresaw this," she whispered, running her hand through her messy brown hair. Carlos, with thoughtful eyes and a few wrinkles on his forehead, nodded. "Frederick has always been tough, but this time he may have gone too far. Customers don't like being forced." Mia looked out the window, where the street lights were beginning to glow in the dusk, and wondered if the restaurant could ever return to how it was. Frederick, once confident in his decision, now stood alone in the small office at the back, looking through the window at the deserted street. His office was small but tidy, an old wooden desk, a family photo hanging on the wall, him, his wife, and 2 young daughters, and a certificate of merit from the local culinary association. Everything will pass, he told himself, but the voice in his head was no longer as certain as before. He recalled an argument with his wife a few years ago, when she said he was too rigid, unwilling to listen. "Richard, sometimes you have to let go a little," she had said. At the time, he brushed it off, but now those words returned, like a small thorn pricking his pride. The next morning, the street in front of LA Terrace came alive with the sound of trucks and cheerful chatter. Volunteers in white t-shirts busily set up a small wooden stage, hanging a large banner with handwritten red letters: "United, we stand strong. Build bridges, not walls." Barron stood in the center, wearing a light blue shirt and still wearing his familiar MAGA hat. He talked with the volunteers, checked the list of sponsors on his phone, and ensured everything went smoothly. He had contacted 2 local charities, one supporting homeless youth with free vocational courses, another focused on community dialogues to reduce social tensions, to turn this event into a meaningful festival. A new volunteer, Eliana, a girl around 25 years old with long black hair and passionate eyes, approached Barron. She wore a white t-shirt printed with the charity's logo, holding a stack of flyers. "I'm Eliana from the Community Action Group," she said, her smile radiant. "Thank you for organizing this. I grew up in a poor neighborhood nearby, and events like this can change the lives of the kids." Barron nodded, listening as she told him about a 15-year-old boy she had once helped, who now had a job thanks to their program. He felt that his idea was truly meaningful, not just a fleeting reaction. By midday, the crowd began to gather, transforming the sidewalk in front of LA Terrace into a lively scene. Families arrived with children running around, holding red, white, and blue balloons floating in the air. Young activists carried handmade signs, "Listen, don't judge," and raised them high as they passed by. The curious onlookers, initially just planning to watch, were gradually drawn in by the jazz music playing from the loudspeakers, the cheerful melodies like an irresistible invitation. A food truck parked nearby, emitting the rich aroma of beef tacos, crispy French fries, and fresh cold lemonade, making the atmosphere warm and intimate like a family picnic. Barron stepped onto the stage, holding the microphone, his voice ringing out clearly and sincerely amidst the gentle breeze. "Hello, everyone," he began, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Unfamiliar faces, but full of hope. "Yesterday, I was asked to leave the restaurant behind me because of this hat. I don't blame them. Each place has its own rules, and I respect that. But what made me think a lot wasn't being refused, but how easily we push each other away just because of differences. I grew up with stories of division, on the news, in books, and I've always wondered, why can't we try to sit down together? I believe we can do better." The crowd applauded, a few shouts of agreement rising from the back. Barron continued, his voice warming up like a small flame being fanned. "Today is not about me or the restaurant, but about all of us. The donations will support struggling youth and programs that build understanding. I want to thank you for coming, for showing that unity is stronger than division." The applause this time was thunderous, like a wave of sound sweeping through the space, confirming that his message had touched people's hearts. Inside LA Terrace, Frederick stood by the large window, looking out at the lively scene through the clear glass. He hadn't expected Barron to respond in this way, not with anger or attack, but with a positive, meaningful action. Through the glass, he saw children drawing with chalk on the sidewalk, houses, suns, and hands holding tight. He saw strangers shaking hands, smiling at each other as if they had known each other for a long time. And he saw Eliana, the volunteer, handing out flyers with a radiant smile. Mia, the server, stood beside him and whispered, "You should go out there. He's not angry. He's doing something good. I've never seen anyone turn a bad day into a day like this." Frederick was silent, his hand gripping the edge of the table, his gaze wavering between determination and contemplation. He remembered the first time he met his wife at a small cafe in San Francisco. She had laughed at him, saying he looked like someone who always wanted to control everything. "But sometimes, Frederick," she said, "you have to let life lead you a little." Now, looking out at the crowd, he wondered if he was missing something bigger. As the sun began to set, the event reached its peak. A local band, 3 young men with guitar, drums, and saxophone, played lively tunes, making even some older people dance along. Children ran around with balloons, their laughter echoing through the street. The donation box gradually filled up with crumpled bills and neatly folded checks from the attendees. Barron moved through the crowd, shaking hands with a father who brought his young son, a dark-skinned man with a shy smile, saying he came because he heard about it online. He listened to Eliana talk more about her work and smiled at the sincere thanks from an elderly woman wearing a red knit hat. He wasn't ostentatious, but his presence exuded a quiet strength, the composure of someone who knew he was on the right path. Then a murmur spread through the crowd. Frederick stepped out of the restaurant, adjusting his tie with visible tension. He was wearing the same gray suit from yesterday, his polished leather shoes clicking on the sidewalk as he approached Barron. The crowd parted, creating space for the two to face each other. Barron smiled lightly, extending his hand first, a natural yet meaningful gesture. "Hello, sir," he said, his voice warm like the late afternoon sun. Frederick grasped his hand after a moment's hesitation, his hand slightly trembling but gradually firming. "I need to talk," he said softly, his eyes avoiding direct contact with Barron, as if afraid to face what he was about to admit. "Of course," Barron replied, leading him to a quiet corner beside the stage, where the music softened and the breeze carried the faint scent of tacos. "I'm listening." Frederick took a deep breath, his voice low but clear, like someone who had just crossed the boundary of pride. "I was wrong yesterday. I thought I was protecting the restaurant, keeping it neutral, but I acted out of fear. Fear of being judged, fear of losing control. Seeing what you've done today, I realize I misunderstood neutrality. It's not about excluding people, it's about creating space for them." "I'm sorry," Barron nodded, his eyes free of reproach, instead filled with understanding. "Thank you for saying that. Apologizing isn't easy, and I appreciate it. I'm not perfect either. I've thought a lot about yesterday, wondering if I could have done something differently." Frederick looked at him, the tension on his face gradually fading, replaced by a small spark in his eyes. "I want to contribute. If there's a way for the restaurant to be involved, I'm willing. I don't want this place to just be a bad memory." Barron smiled, a sincere smile that lit up his youthful face. "The best way is to start over. Maybe LA Terrace could host a community evening, a place for people to talk, to listen to each other. No politics, just people. I think you'd do a great job." Frederick nodded, his eyes brightening with a new idea. "I agree. Let's do it together. I'll invite you back, this time as a guest, not as someone being kicked out." He chuckled lightly, for the first time that day, and the crowd around them applauded, not out of politeness, but in genuine recognition of a moment of reconciliation. As the event drew to a close, the sunset bathed the street in gold, the last rays of the day illuminating Barron's blonde hair and Frederick's gray suit. Barron stepped onto the stage one last time, the microphone in his hand trembling slightly as he spoke. "We all make mistakes," he began, his voice warm like an autumn breeze. "I do too. Yesterday I wondered if I should have argued back or done something different. But today I've learned that it's not the mistakes that matter, but how we fix them. Today wasn't just about fundraising. It was proof that despite our differences, we can find common ground. Thank you for making that happen." The crowd applauded loudly, their eyes sparkling in the twilight. Children waved at Barron, elderly people nodded in approval, and Eliana, from a distance, gave him a thumbs up. Los Angeles, in that moment, was no longer a city of distant dreams or endless conflicts, but a place where a story of division was rewritten into a journey of connection and hope. The story you've just read is not just a journey. It's a ray of hope, a reminder that from fractures, we can find understanding and connection. As I write these lines, I can't help but be moved by the power of reconciliation, and I believe you feel something special too, don't you? If you want to continue accompanying stories that touch the heart like this one, subscribe to our channel today. With just one click, you'll become part of a community that loves connection and meaning. Please leave your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know how this story has moved you.